Now, for me, the Boogeyman will always be an actual man. It will never be an undead Wendigo hiding in a child's closet. I'm sorry, Stephen. Hi guys, so before we get into it, a very quick disclaimer that you'll find all my other reviews of Stephen King adaptations in my Stephen King playlist, and there will be spoilers today, although given the fact that this is a fairly recent movie, I will avoid telling you what happens in the finale. So this is another film based on a short story from Night Shift. I did say that we would be on that collection for quite some time. This film, by the way, has got nothing to do with the Boogeyman trilogy that came out during the noughties. So there was a trio of films that came out, Boogeyman 1, 2 and 3. I've not seen them myself, but as far as I know, none of those are based on the Stephen King short story The Boogeyman, whereas this film from 2023 is based on the Stephen King short story. Now, out of all the adaptations of King that I've covered so far, this one is definitely based on the most thinnest of material possible. I mean, The Boogeyman as a short story is short. So it's about this guy who goes to see this clinical psychologist in his office somewhere, and he starts telling him a story about how his kids have started dying one by one in the middle of the night. He thinks because of a mysterious boogeyman creature living in the closet. Obviously, the police don't see the situation this way, but this parent certainly does. Now, he tells this very macabre story over the course of about 20 or 30 pages, maybe. But it's never boring because this character, I think his name's Lester, I think he might be an Italian-American, but he's a very abrasive sort of person, and the words and phrases he uses in this context are very amusing. Like it's really entertaining just listening to the byplay between him and the psychologist. But at the end of the story, just as he's about to leave the room, he realizes that the psychologist is actually the boogeyman. So the boogeyman has taken the day off from living in this guy's closets and has gone to this office to pose as a psychologist to kill this person. It's an absolutely preposterous plot twist, and the only way that it works is down to the fact that this is an extremely short story. This would not fly in a longer novel, but Stephen King would know that. Now, in this movie adaptation, we fly through the events of the short story in the first 15 or 20 minutes or so, and then everything after that is just new, made-up material. So we've got this guy, Lester, still going to see the psychologist, except it's in the psychologist's home this time, change of location. And he starts telling the same story from in the written work, except he's breezing through it a lot quicker. And then the psychologist leaves the room for some reason, and this gives Lester the freedom to wander around the house. And then he mysteriously dies in the closet, either by suicide or at the hands of the boogeyman. And I don't think that's ever revealed during the film. But from this point forwards, the boogeyman has now transferred his attentions from that other family to this family that the psychologist belongs to. He's got a teenage daughter and another little girl as well, and so our film proceeds with there, except unlike the skin changer, skinwalker, whatever you want to call it, that's in the written work, here, like I said in the intro, it's more like a Wendigo type thing, and not that most people will know the difference. Now, this was directed by a guy called Rob Savage. He did The Excellent Host back in 2020, a brilliant found footage film. Check it out if you've not seen it. It's only about 59 minutes long, but it's really cool. In terms of recognisable stars, so we've got Sophie Thatcher here playing Sadie, the teenage daughter. She becomes the main character after a while in this. So it starts out the psychologist being front and centre. But it was only a few weeks ago that I saw Thatcher in Heretic, so clearly an actress who's on the up, although I didn't recognise her in this, I must admit, because she's got a different haircut. There's also an appearance by David Dastmalchian, who plays Lester. He's not in the film for very long. Now, to my knowledge, this is an actor whose career has really been on the up in recent times, so I'm sort of surprised that he's not playing the role of the psychologist in this. And I just think that if this film was being made today instead of a year or two ago, probably Dastmalchian would have played the bigger part. This is sadly a very sleepy movie to get through at times. There were several moments throughout this where I felt my attention drifting away, and I had to sort of snap myself back to attention so I wouldn't lose track of what was going on. The creature here is very dull. I sort of wish they'd stayed with the creature from the source material, because the idea of the boogeyman impersonating other people, that would be quite scary to me, I think. Although I guess if they had gone with that, then the movie might have started to feel a bit too much like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or It Follows, and then it wouldn't have felt like King's own work, maybe. But still, there are way too many times in this where I was just reminded of poor films like Night Swim rather than good films like Barbarian, which kind of has a similar creature to what we get here, but it is a much better movie. But the creature in the Boogeyman, it's problematic in so many ways, right from the very first scene in the movie. So for some reason, they have the thing show up and kill a kid, and I'm just thinking, well, why not show it for like 30-40 minutes, and then we'll have all this build-up of tension, wondering whether it's a real-life killer or a creature, but they just don't do that. One good thing about it is that it does this weird talking thing where it's saying words but in a really creepy way, almost to itself, as if it's like an undead version of Billy from Black Christmas. But I kind of liked that. But for some reason, that aspect of its personality seems to get dropped like halfway through the movie. One annoying thing is that, okay, so it's set up quite early on that the creature has left the dead family at the abandoned house and gone to the psychologist's house to start up a new reign of terror. But throughout the story, it then goes back to the abandoned house and then back to the other house. It seems to be able to change addresses on a whim and very quickly. But I just thought that was silly. But I think the reason they've done that is so that the creature can go and kill the one remaining woman at the abandoned house, just to give us an extra kill. But I think it would have been better to just show this woman pointlessly staking out her old house, and it would be quite poignant knowing that she's wasting her time, knowing that the boogeyman's never going to go back there. A lot of the tension in this film is generated from having characters use soft lights rather than the main overheads. So this creature, it can't operate in the light, basically. It can only kill in the dark. So obviously the writers have had it so that all the characters never like to have the lights on. Once it gets into the evening, that's it. Those overheads are staying completely off. Like, characters in this film are just obsessed with like using novelty lights. Like, so you'll have characters sat around in the dark, and the only light is coming from Christmas lights, which will flash on and off and on. And then obviously at the moment that they go off, the creature might show up in the background or attack or something like that. But if they just had the main lights on, like, nothing would be able to happen. But all the characters just have lights as if they've bought them from a gadget shop. Like, the young girl, she's got this football of light. It's like an orb of light, something that Saruman would throw at people in Lord of the Rings. But she gets this orb. Only a child would have a light like this. And she rolls it down the landing, and of course it ends up illuminating the creature at the far end. But I got to the end of this film, and I just thought to myself, why didn't they just turn the lights on? Game over. Creature can't operate. But this is all taking place in the middle of a suburban neighbourhood where there's lights everywhere. Everybody's got access to easy electricity. I wonder if this creature would have been more effective, in my eyes, if it had been a woodland horror film where it's just like a cabin or two and everything's being run on a generator which could easily break down. I'd find it a little bit more believable then. But the finale of this film, where people are just trying to survive the creature because nobody can be bothered to press a light switch, is just unfathomable to me. Sadly, the human characters can't rescue the movie. Everybody here is either boring or just mean-spirited. We don't even get the amusing version of Lester that we got in the short story with all his idiosyncrasies. The psychologist and his family, they are grieving the loss of the guy's wife. But I don't think this was the right film to introduce a grieving family as the main characters, because we've already got all this sense of loss from Lester's side of the story. So why did we need it as well in the psychologist's household? It doesn't really compute for me. Plus, the fact that they're getting over the loss of this woman in a car crash makes the first 15-20 minutes a little bit confusing, because you see the death of this child and then we cut to the psychologist and his family, and we just assume, when they then look really glum-faced, that they're grieving over the child, but actually that wasn't their child. But you wouldn't know that. unless you spotted one particular clue that's only on screen for like 1 second, and I didn't. So I was feeling a little bit lost after a while, and so I rewound the movie back to the opening scene, and that's when I spotted this one moment where you can see this picture frame of the child's family, and it's only then that you realise that, yeah, that child doesn't belong to the psychologist's family. But I mean, anybody could be glancing down at their popcorn and miss that 1 second where they show that picture frame. So for me, it's just bad screenwriting. The easiest solution would be just to have the main family not grieving over somebody. I don't get what the movie really gains from that. But even the characters outside of the family are nothing to write home about. The woman in the abandoned house is just psychotic and annoying. And Sadie's friends at school, they're all just like Lindsay Lohan's Mean Girls friends. They're awful to her. Like, why are there no good characters in this movie? Not even one, in my opinion. There's some good instances of effective music used throughout this. There's a few times I was quite impressed with that, although the song on the end credits sounds like something that would be better used in a Tremors film than something a lot more serious than this, in my opinion. There's one great scene that I really liked, and that's when Sadie goes to the abandoned house for the first time. Watching her walk through this place was kind of creepy, actually. It reminded me of when Virginia Madsen's walking through the tower block in Cabrini Green in Candyman. But this effect is only in place until the psychotic woman, Lester's wife, turns up, and then all the tension is just suckered out of the whole thing. On the whole, I'm not a fan of this movie. It is not the best example of the genius of Stephen King, unfortunately, although we have to remind ourselves that only about 10% of this movie is Stephen King, and the rest of it they've just made up on the fly to turn it into a bit of a cash grab. But yeah, 2023 Boogeyman, not for me, and I don't know if I would appreciate the original trilogy any better. Do let me know in the comments if those films are any good, but for me, this one, nah. We've reached that point where I normally show you the version of the film that I own, blah, 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 but I don't have a copy of The Boogeyman, thankfully, because I certainly wouldn't be watching it again. I'll probably just chuck it straight in the bin. But what I can do instead is go to the Bag of Terror and show you what sort of score I'm going to give this. So we got 1, 2 bloody axes out of 5, which I think is quite generous, probably. I mean, this film's not a train wreck. There's some parts of it which are reasonable, but on the whole it's very mediocre, and I certainly won't be returning to it. So I think the conclusion that we can mainly draw from this is that the original Boogeyman story just wasn't really intended to be a movie. I mean, I can't even imagine it being a short story in a VHS anthology. I can't even imagine it being that, and having it done justice, you know. So I think we'll swiftly move on from this one. I'm not sure what my next King adaptation is going to be. It will either be 2024 Salem's Lot, because I still haven't seen it yet, and I think it's just about to become available to rent in the UK, or we'll move on to the next Night Shift one, which I think will be Maximum Overdrive, which is an adaptation of the short story Trucks, a story I really like, actually, though I've heard Maximum Overdrive isn't much to write home about. But like I said, I'm not entirely sure what will be the next one. But for now, I'll bid you farewell, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.